Welcome to the Financial Pathway Podcast. We're here to help you go to the next level in your finances with practical advice from speaker and financial planner Nate Skelly.
Okay, we're coming to you with the 4 articles for this month, the month of November, for our Money Minute Roundup. As always, if you are on the Money Minute email list, you're getting these in your inbox, so you can actually click on these articles and read more about them yourself. If you'd like to get added to that list and see these articles, you can go to nateskelly.com and sign up there, or you can just email me info@nateskelly and I'll add you to the list. We're going to start with, are you middle class? I find this to be a very interesting question because, of course, lots of us would consider ourselves middle class, and the term middle class seems to be pretty nebulous. It seems to be very open for interpretation. Nobody exactly knows what you mean when you say middle class. So let's put some parameters, some boundaries on that. What is middle class in reality? About 52% of American households are considered technically middle class, but I would say if you were to survey Americans, you would find that much more than 52% are going to self-identify as middle class, and that's because I think there's not a very good or uniform idea in people's minds about what constitutes middle class. And it makes sense, right? People tend to want to herd towards the middle when it comes to these types of questions because it seems awkward socially to call yourself lower or upper class. There's a stigma attached with either one of them. Famously, Kamala Harris on the campaign trail has talked a lot about how she grew up in a middle class family because that sounds a lot more relatable, right? That's most people would resonate with that. There was the meme of David Beckham and Victoria Beckham where she's getting interviewed and she's claiming that she grew up in a middle class household, and then David interrupts to say, what kind of car did your dad drive when you're growing up? And I think it was a Rolls Royce. Basically, for all of us, whether you grew up with money or without money, there's a tendency to want to identify as middle class because if you're upper class, it seems elitist and out of touch to want to say that you're upper class. But conversely, if you're lower class, it seems like people are going to view you as less than if you identify as lower class. So you'd rather say, well, I'm lower middle class or I'm upper middle class. But of course, not everybody can actually be middle class in reality. The breakdown is this: 28% would be considered lower, 52% would be considered middle, and 19% would be considered upper. But that's going to depend on where, of course, you live and your household size and your household income. Middle class in Oklahoma City looks different than middle class in New York City. So if you want to indulge your envy and jealousy a little bit and want to use this calculator to see where you fall in those 3 categories, you can put in your state, your metro area, your household income, and then the number of people in your household, and it'll tell you where you fit in that, for your specific area, lower, middle, upper income. I find it very fascinating because this idea of middle class has been so poorly defined up to this point. It's just kind of interesting to see some hardline numbers and some specificity around what actually constitutes middle class depending on the area that you live in. Moving on to our next article. This comes to us from the New York Times, a series of maps, very interesting, very telling maps about the recent election. Going into, of course, to the 2024 election, there was a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of analysis of polls, and it seemed like this is a toss-up. It's a razor-thin margin. It's coming down to these 7 swing states, and who knows what's going to happen. And of course, on election night and in the days following, it became very clear that Donald Trump was going to win the Electoral College handily, taking all of the swing states in the process. This map in particular, though, shows how each county voted relative to the 2020 election. Did they move farther to the right or farther to the left? And what you see in this map is a sea. I suppose you could call it a wave of red. Very interesting that not just in particular areas, not just in areas where Donald Trump was expected to do well, but all across the country, from the West Coast to the East Coast to the South to the Midwest. A lot of the country moved much, much more in Donald Trump's direction than they were 4 years ago. And not just areas of the country, but almost every demographic shifted more towards Donald Trump. And so a very interesting realignment that I think we're seeing with the Electoral College. Places like Florida and Ohio that used to be very much the toss-up states have seemed to move into the solid red category. And even states like New York and New Jersey that are considered solid blue states, not even anywhere close to toss-ups, moved actually quite a bit to the right and the margins of victory for Kamala Harris in places like New York and New Jersey specifically were much less than Donald Trump's margin of victory in Florida. So just really interesting how the electoral map shifts over time, and election to election we start to see some of that political realignment going on. If you want to see the previous maps, the 2020 map, the 2016 map, and how those counties shifted in those elections compared to the previous election, I think it's just very interesting to see how those things change over time. Okay, moving on to our third article. This will be very helpful and informative if you are a business owner. You may have seen some notices around this. I live in the world of finance, so it's hard for me to sometimes to gauge how much this is on people's radar, but I want to put this out. This is very important. If you're a business owner and you have not looked into this yet, you need to do this by the end of the year. The beneficial ownership requirements. Basically, what happened was back in, I think it was 2020, there was a Corporate Transparency Act, also known as the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Part of what came out of that new act is that there's a financial crimes enforcement network that is put in place to crack down on money laundering and illicit activities, terrorist funding, these types of things. And the main thing that you need to know is if you own a business, particularly a smaller business like an LLC, you very likely need to report the beneficial owners. And it's a very simple and easy process to do, but if you don't do it by the end of the year, you could be subject to fines for not doing it by the end of this year. What you have to report is the beneficial owners. Basically, anybody who has substantial control over the company or owns 25% or more, their name, date of birth, address, and government ID. If you don't file by January 1st, 2025, then there could be up to $500 a day penalty for noncompliance. I don't think they'll be as strict in the early years, since of course they try to give some grace and some leeway for people to get to get this requirement in place. But of course you definitely don't want to play around with that. You want to get that done by the end of the year. Essentially say, okay, Nate, why are we even doing this? Well, because in the past, for people to carry out illicit activities or to do money laundering, they would use shell corporations. They'd be able to use these LLCs with just, some generic name, and they'd be able to move money and perform financial transactions without having to actually put their name on it. And so this is a way to make sure that people cannot use LLCs as a way to shield their identity and do things that they don't want their name attached to. I'm not going to weigh too much into the political aspects of it or even necessarily my opinion on it, rather just to say, hey, business owners, if you are a business owner or you know a business owner, please make sure that you're aware of this. The site to go to is the FinCEN site, FINCEN.gov, and you can fill out the beneficial owner requirement form there. I think it's a pretty straightforward process, but I think there's a lot of people with LLCs that have still not done that. So just putting that word out there, please make sure you get that done by the end of the year. And now we move into our last article. This comes to us from the Visual Capitalist. Retirement savings by age. Again, I don't share this similar to the one about are you middle class. I don't share this to encourage you to give into your envy or play the comparison game, but rather to underscore the importance of retirement savings and thinking about your progress based on your age and whether or not you are on track. A few months ago, I put something out on Facebook, and I think I may even put it out on the podcast, where I said, hey, folks, if you would like a free retirement estimate to see if you are on track for retirement based on your current savings rate, income, retirement balance, those types of things, I would love to send that to you. And I'll extend that offer if anybody's listening to this and say, hey, Nate, I would like to take you up on that offer. Just shoot me an email, info@nateskelly.com, and I'll shoot you an email back with the info I need, and I'd be happy to put that together and take a 3-4 minute video and just show you where you're at and your progress towards retirement and where that might put you at retirement age. But the breakdown here, and I won't cite all the numbers, but of course under 35 is the lowest. Then it goes 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 to 74. So it breaks it down by those ages, and it gives the average and median savings. And just keep in mind, that's a very pivotal word when it comes to finances. A lot of times people mix those two up. Averages, we add everybody's balance up and then divide by the number of people that there is. Median is we line everybody up 1 to 100, and we take the person, number 50, and where are they at? And I think a lot of times what people think of is they say, oh, what's the average? They're thinking of the person in the middle, right? Not the highest, not the lowest, the guy who's smack dab in the middle. But that's not the same as average balance. Average balance is always going to be higher because people at the very high end that make a lot of money are going to skew that higher. So, for instance, the average retirement balance for 35 to 44-year-olds is $142,000, but the median balance is $45,000, almost $100,000 lower. So, in other words, the regular middle person is substantially behind what the average might indicate. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to retirement savings, like I'll highlight, okay, the 55 to 64 age group. Average is $538,000, but the median is $185,000. Okay, let me just say this, and I'm not saying this in a demeaning way, but in a reality, if you've got Social Security and $185,000 in your retirement account, and that's all you have to retire on, you better have a house paid off and pretty low expenses, because otherwise I don't really see how you're going to be able to make that work. Gone are the days of pensions. So we know that in America today, your retirement and your income in retirement is largely up to you. Yes, Social Security is there, but that's only to supplement. That's not going to come anywhere close to replacing your pre-retirement income. So unless you have other sources of income, and of course, I'm talking like real retirement, not, oh, I'm just going to keep working in retirement, which, by the way, a lot of people say, well, I'll just keep working. Okay, well, that might not be up to you. You may not have the ability or the desire, but more importantly, the ability to continue to work. People just think, oh, yeah, I'll have the same health, the same ability, the same stamina, the same energy that I do today, and I'll just keep working. But the reality is that doesn't usually happen a lot of times. And so you have to think ahead. And certainly if you're under 35 years old, now is the ideal time to say, hey, I'm gonna really take savings seriously, because that impact over time will be much, much more substantial. One of my favorite things I get to do with people is talk to them about the rule of 72, especially people who are under 35 years old, and just showing them how much that impact can have over time. If you're earning 8 to 9% average annual return on your money, which is historically what the stock market has done, not that that's a guarantee, or not that that's what we can bank on, but if the market does historically what it has done for the last 100 plus years, what would that do over time? And just seeing the impact of doubling your money, compounding your money multiple times over several decades, and how much money that turns into is really, really powerful. So I just highlight that to say, and if you want to look at that article and kind of see the breakdown, obviously it's interesting to see that. But just to highlight, hey, sure, you can compare where you're at and say, oh, okay, well, I'm less than the average, or I'm higher than the median. But all of that is not helpful without considering your specific situation. You say, $500,000, is that enough for retirement? Well, that depends. It depends on a lot of different factors. For some people, that's plenty. And for some people, that's not nearly enough. So again, I'll extend my offer if you want to look in a little bit more deeply and say, hey, Nate, can you help me with looking and seeing, am I on track for retirement based on my current trajectory? Happy to do that. And it's just an important thing for us all to consider and make sure that we're doing the best we can to save and plan diligently for the future. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us on this month's edition of the Money Minute article. As always, we got some popular posts for the month. And then I redid a 403B episode on YouTube. If you're not following YouTube, go over there, subscribe to the YouTube page. I did a kind of a refresh episode on why a 403B is the ultimate pastor's retirement plan. And if you've not gotten a chance to check that out, go and do so there. All right, have a great day, and I will see you on the next episode.